What would you do if your family handed you a detailed proposal for how to spend your fortune before you'd even had time to process your success? I'm Elena Vasquez, 34, and last year I sold my quantum computing startup for $45 million. After 8 years of sleeping on office couches and living on protein bars, I thought my family would celebrate my achievement. Instead, they presented me with a typed document outlining exactly how I should distribute my wealth, with the majority going to fund my sister's lifestyle and my parents' hidden debts. The betrayal cut deeper than any failed pitch or crashed server I'd ever faced. What happened next changed everything I believed about family, money, and what we owe the people who raised us. Stay with me because this story gets more shocking than even I could have imagined. Growing up in Phoenix with my parents, Dr. Robert Vasquez and Professor Maria Vasquez, looked perfect from the outside. Dad was a respected cardiologist. Mom taught economics at Arizona State University. We lived in a sprawling house in Scottsdale with a pool, 3-car garage, and every advantage money could buy. My younger sister Victoria and I wanted for nothing materially, but perfection was the family business, and I learned early that love came with conditions. Victoria was born when I was 4, and she immediately became the star of our household. Where I was serious and bookish, she was charming and social. Where I struggled to make friends, she effortlessly collected admirers. Our parents' faces lit up differently when Victoria entered a room, like she brought sunshine with her. I noticed the pattern by age 6. When I brought home perfect report cards, Dad would glance over them and say, "Good job, Elena." We expect nothing less. When Victoria managed to pass 2nd grade after struggling all year, they threw her a pizza party and bought her a new bike. Elena doesn't need as much encouragement, I heard Mom tell my aunt once. She's naturally driven. Victoria needs more support to reach her potential. So I became the invisible high achiever, the daughter who could handle everything alone. By middle school, I was doing my own laundry, making my own lunches, and managing my homework without supervision. Victoria, meanwhile, got daily help with everything from organizing her backpack to remembering to turn in assignments. The academic pressure was relentless but unspoken. Straight A's weren't celebrated because they were simply expected. When I scored 1,580 on my SATs, Dad's response was, "What happened to those other 20 points?" When Victoria scored 1,100 after extensive tutoring, they took her to dinner at her favorite restaurant. High school clarified our roles even more. I threw myself into advanced placement classes, robotics club, and math competitions. I spent most weekends at academic competitions or science fairs, driven by some desperate need to finally achieve something worthy of the pride I saw in my parents' eyes when they looked at Victoria. Victoria, meanwhile, was homecoming queen, varsity cheerleader, and the center of our family's social universe. Her boyfriends were welcomed warmly. Her friends filled our house with laughter. Her drama club performances were attended by extended family who drove hours to watch her shine. I had exactly 2 friends, both fellow robotics club members, and no dating life to speak of. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I'd internalized the message that relationships were for people like Victoria, not serious people like me. The college years separated us further. I got into MIT with a full scholarship and dove into computer science and engineering. Victoria chose UCLA, not for any particular academic program, but because she wanted the California lifestyle and social scene. She changed majors 4 times, from theater to communications to business to psychology, extending her college experience to 6 years. My parents funded every extra semester without complaint. When I asked to attend a prestigious coding boot camp that summer to enhance my skills, they suggested I get a job instead since I was always so capable of handling things independently. Elena has her scholarship, Dad explained when I questioned the different treatment. Victoria needs more support during this transitional time. After MIT, I moved to Seattle for a software engineering position at a growing tech company. The Pacific Northwest felt like freedom after years of trying to earn approval that never came. I worked obsessively, staying late, volunteering for the hardest projects, building a reputation as someone who could solve impossible problems. Victoria, meanwhile, moved back home after graduation, ostensibly to save money while figuring out her path. That temporary arrangement stretched into 3 years of her living rent-free, working part-time at a boutique, and spending most evenings out with friends. During my rare visits home, the dynamic was always the same. Victoria would regale everyone with stories of her social adventures while I sat quietly, too tired from work to compete for conversational space. When I tried to share updates about my projects or career growth, the conversation would inevitably swing back to Victoria's more entertaining tales. Work talk is so boring, Victoria would say with a laugh. Tell us something fun, Elena. The message was clear. My accomplishments weren't dinner table material. At T28, I made the leap into entrepreneurship. I'd identified a gap in quantum computing applications for financial modeling, a niche market that I believed could revolutionize how banks and investment firms process complex algorithms. I scraped together $50,000 from my savings, found two brilliant co-founders from my MIT network, and launched Quantum Edge from a shared workspace in downtown Seattle. The early days were brutal. 18-hour workdays were normal. I lived on coffee, determination, and the occasional protein bar. We couldn't afford proper offices, so we worked from coffee shops, libraries, and each other's apartments. I slept on the office couch more nights than in my own bed. When I called home to share my entrepreneurial leap, the response was predictably underwhelming. That sounds risky, Elena, Mom said. Are you sure you shouldn't stick with a stable job? Your father and I worry about your financial security. That same week, they loaned Victoria $15,000 to invest in her friend's jewelry business, which folded within 6 months. Victoria needs to explore her creative side, Dad explained when I questioned the double standard. You've always been more practical. The first 2 years of Quantum Edge were a masterclass in near failure. We burned through our initial capital faster than projected. Our first product iteration was too complex for our target market. We went months without paying ourselves, surviving on ramen and the occasional freelance consulting gig. I missed every family gathering during this period, including Victoria's engagement party to Derek, a real estate developer she'd been dating. For 8 months, my absence was noted disapprovingly. Despite my explanation that we were in the middle of a crucial funding round, family should come first, Mom lectured during one of our increasingly infrequent phone calls. Victoria was hurt that you couldn't prioritize her special day. Meanwhile, Victoria's wedding planning became the family's full-time obsession. My parents contributed $40,000 to what Victoria described as her dream wedding. When I asked if they could help with a small business loan to keep Quantum Edge afloat during a particularly difficult cash flow period, Dad suggested I consider a more traditional career path. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, Elena. Maybe it's time to rejoin the corporate world. I didn't ask again. Year 3 brought our breakthrough. We developed a quantum algorithm that could process financial risk models 1,000 times faster than traditional computing methods. Major investment banks started paying attention. We secured our first major client, Goldman Sachs, followed quickly. That's when the acquisition offers started arriving. The first offer came from $180 million for the company. I declined, believing we had room to grow. Then Microsoft offered $250 million. Still not enough for what I knew we were worth. When Technova, the world's largest quantum computing company, offered $450 million, I had to take it seriously. The number was staggering, life-changing, generational wealth. After extensive due diligence and negotiation, we agreed on $375 million for Quantum Edge, with $45 million as my share after taxes and co-founder distributions, $45 million. The number didn't feel real even when I saw it in my bank account. I decided to surprise my family with the news in person. I booked a flight to Phoenix, planned to take everyone out for a celebration dinner, maybe even surprise them with some generous gifts to show my appreciation for their support over the years. I should have known better. The reunion dinner at their country club was initially warm. Victoria brought Derek and their twin toddlers, and for a moment, it felt like a normal family gathering. My parents seemed genuinely pleased to see me, asking about my life in Seattle and congratulating me on the acquisition they'd read about in the Wall Street Journal. $45 million, Dad said, shaking his head in amazement. My daughter, the tech mogul, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had their full attention and approval. The mood shifted during dessert. Elena, Mom said carefully, we need to discuss something as a family. Something important. She exchanged glances with Dad and Victoria, and I realized this dinner hadn't been spontaneous. They'd been planning this conversation. We've been thinking about your success and how it affects all of us, Dad continued. Family wealth should benefit the whole family, don't you think? What followed was a detailed presentation of my family's financial situation that I'd never known existed. Victoria and Derek were drowning in debt from their wedding, house purchase, and lifestyle inflation. The twins' daycare costs were crushing their monthly budget. Derek's real estate business had suffered during the recent market downturn. More shocking was learning about my parents' situation. Despite their professional success and upper-middle-class lifestyle, they were heavily leveraged. Their house had been refinanced multiple times. Dad had significant gambling debts from regular trips to Las Vegas that I'd assumed were medical conferences. We've been maintaining appearances, Mom admitted quietly. But we're struggling more than you know. The revelation was staggering. My parents, who had always seemed financially secure, who had denied me help during my startup struggles because they were teaching me independence, had been living beyond their means for years. Victoria started crying. Elena, we're drowning. The twins' medical bills, Derek's business loan, our mortgage, were 1 month away from losing the house, and your father's health issues require expensive treatments our insurance doesn't fully cover, Mom added. The stress of our financial situation is literally killing him. I felt like I was watching a carefully orchestrated performance. The timing seemed too convenient, the revelations too dramatic, the pressure too intense. What exactly are you asking me to do? I said carefully. Dad slid a folder across the table. Inside was a typed document titled Vasquez Family Financial Restructuring Plan. I stared at the proposal in disbelief. They had created a detailed plan for how I should spend my money. Victoria and Derek's debts would be paid off completely, approximately $800,000. My parents' house would be purchased outright, $1 million. Dad's gambling debts would be settled for they claimed I didn't know about. But it didn't stop there. They wanted me to establish trust funds for the twins' education, provide Victoria with capital to start her own marketing consultancy, fund my parents' early retirement, and purchase a vacation home that the whole family could use. The total request was $18 million. This way, everyone benefits from your success, Victoria said hopefully. It's what families do for each other. I closed the folder, my hands shaking. You've thought this through very thoroughly. We had to, Mom said. Your success is wonderful, but it means nothing if it doesn't help the people who matter most. And what about what I want to do with my money? You'll still have $27 million left, Dad pointed out. More than enough for any reasonable person's needs. Reasonable. The word hit like a slap. Apparently, wanting to control my own wealth was unreasonable. I need time to think about this, I said, standing up from the table. Of course, Victoria said quickly. But Elena, please don't take too long. We're running out of time with some of these debts. I left the restaurant in a daze, driving aimlessly through Phoenix neighborhoods where I'd grown up, trying to process what had just happened. My family hadn't just asked for help, they'd presented me with a detailed plan for redistributing my wealth based on what they thought was fair. Back in my hotel room, I called my financial advisor, Sarah, and my lawyer, James. I needed professional perspective on what I'd just encountered. Unfortunately, this is more common than you'd think, Sarah said after I explained the situation. Sudden wealth often brings out family dynamics that were always there but previously hidden. James was more direct. Elena, you need to understand that if you agree to this level of financial entanglement, you'll be responsible for your family's money management for the rest of your life. This won't be a one-time fix. Their words clarified something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. This wasn't just about helping family members through temporary difficulties. This was about permanently altering the power dynamics in our relationships, making me responsible for everyone else's financial decisions forever. The next morning, I returned to my parents' house for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. They were waiting in the living room, Mom, Dad, Victoria, and Derek. The twins were conveniently at a neighbor's house. Have you had time to consider our proposal? Dad asked. I have. And I need to ask you some questions first. I started with, Victoria, how long have you and Derek been struggling financially? She shifted uncomfortably. It's been building up over the past 2 years, and yet you've been posting Instagram photos from expensive restaurants and vacation destinations during that time? We were trying to maintain some normalcy, Derek interjected defensively. I turned to my parents. Dad, how long have you had gambling debts? The question hung in the air like a bomb. Mom's face went white. That's not how did you. I had my lawyer do some research, I said quietly. Public records show multiple liens against this house, credit card judgments, and yes, markers from 3 different casinos. The facade crumbled. Dad's shoulders sagged, and Mom started crying. It started small, Dad admitted. Medical conferences in Vegas, just a little entertainment. But the losses added up, and I kept trying to win it back. For how long? 6 years. 6 years. My entire entrepreneurial journey. They'd been lying about their financial stability while denying me help and lecturing me about responsibility. And none of you thought to mention this when I was struggling to keep my company alive? When I was sleeping on office couches and living on protein bars? We didn't want to burden you, Mom said weakly. Burden me? But you're comfortable burdening me now? Victoria stood up, tears streaming down her face. Elena, we're family. We should have been honest earlier, but we're being honest now. We need your help. What you need is financial counseling, debt management, and addiction treatment for Dad. What you're asking for is a bailout that solves nothing and teaches no one accountability. The room exploded. Victoria accused me of being heartless and selfish. Derek called me a hypocrite who'd forgotten where I came from. My parents cycled between guilt trips about family duty and threats about what would happen if I refused to help. We've already told the extended family about your success, Mom said desperately. They're expecting you to help stabilize the family finances. You had no right to make promises on my behalf. We're your parents, Dad said angrily. We have every right to expect your support after everything we've sacrificed for you. Sacrificed? You mean like when you refused to help with my business loan but gave Victoria $40,000 for her wedding? Like when you paid for her extra college years, but suggested I get a job instead of attending that coding boot camp? The accusations flew for another hour. I was selfish, ungrateful, and money-obsessed. They were manipulative, dishonest, and financially irresponsible. Victoria sobbed that I was destroying the family. Derek accused me of thinking I was better than everyone else. Finally, I stood up. I love all of you, but I can't agree to your proposal. I'm willing to help in appropriate ways: addiction counseling for Dad, financial planning for Victoria and Derek, education funds for the twins that you can't access directly. That's not enough, Victoria said flatly. It's what I'm comfortable offering. Then you're not the sister I thought you were, she replied. Mom shook her head sadly. Elena, if you walk away from your family's needs when you have the means to help, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Maybe, but if I enable this dysfunction, I'll definitely regret it. I left Phoenix that afternoon, unsure if I'd ever return. The months that followed were emotionally devastating. My family launched a campaign that would have impressed any marketing team. Social media posts about the importance of family loyalty. Text messages with photos of the twins, accompanied by guilt-inducing captions about the aunt who'd abandoned them. Phone calls from extended family members lecturing me about duty and responsibility. The manipulation was so intense that I finally changed my phone number and took a temporary break from social media. I needed space to think clearly about what kind of relationships I actually wanted. That's when I discovered the full extent of their deception. My lawyer's continued investigation revealed that my parents had been using my success story to secure additional loans and credit lines. They'd been telling creditors that their daughter would be helping with family debts, using my net worth as collateral for their financial irresponsibility. Even worse, I learned that Victoria had been similarly embellishing her connection to my success. She'd been presenting herself to potential business partners as someone with direct access to tech industry capital through her investor sister. The betrayal went deeper than money. They'd been commodifying our relationship, turning my achievements into their financial leverage, for months before even asking for my help. But the most devastating discovery came from an unexpected source. Derek's business partner, Marcus, contacted me directly after learning about the family conflict. He felt obligated to share something that had been bothering him for months. Elena, I don't know if this matters, but Victoria and Derek have been planning this conversation with your parents since the acquisition was announced, he told me over coffee during a business trip to Seattle. Derek showed me the proposal document weeks before your family dinner. They'd calculated exactly how much they thought they could ask for based on your reported net worth. The revelation was like a physical blow. The tears at dinner, the desperate financial revelations, the coordinated family pressure, all of it had been planned in advance. They'd scripted the conversation designed to manipulate me into compliance. I thanked Marcus for his honesty and Spent the rest of that week processing the full scope of my family's betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It was about the complete absence of genuine relationship, the reduction of our connection to a financial transaction. That's when I made my final decision. Working with my legal and financial team, I established exactly the kind of help I was comfortable providing. Education trusts for the twins that neither Victoria nor Derek could access. A one-time payment to cover Dad's addiction treatment, contingent on his completion of the program. Financial counseling resources for the entire family, but I also established firm boundaries. No direct cash transfers, no ongoing financial support, no family business investments, and most importantly, no further discussion of money at family gatherings. I sent a detailed letter explaining my decisions and my boundaries. I expressed love for all of them while making clear that any future relationship would require respect for my choices and an end to financial manipulation. The response was swift and ugly. My parents accused me of being cold and calculating. Victoria posted a public social media rant about wealthy siblings who abandoned their families. Extended family members chose sides, and most chose theirs. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely cut off from my family of origin. The isolation was initially devastating, but it also created space for something I'd never experienced. Relationships based on genuine connection rather than obligation or expectation. I started therapy with Dr. Jennifer, who specialized in family trauma and high-achieving individuals. Through our work together, I began to understand the psychological patterns that had shaped my entire life. You were trained from childhood to believe your worth was contingent on achievement and service to others, she explained. When you finally achieved unprecedented success, your family's value system demanded that you continue serving, just at a higher financial level. The work was painful but revelatory. I began to recognize how my workaholism, relationship difficulties, and chronic anxiety all stemmed from a desperate need to earn love that was always conditional. I also started building the kind of life I'd never allowed myself to have. I joined a rock climbing gym and discovered a passion for physical challenges that had nothing to do with work. I took cooking classes and learned to create beautiful meals for myself, not just grab protein bars. Between meetings, most importantly, I began forming friendships with people who knew nothing about my net worth. Through volunteer work at a local coding boot camp for women, I met Lisa, Sarah, and Amanda, three brilliant, driven women who appreciated my expertise and mentorship, not my bank account. At a tech conference in San Francisco, I met David, an environmental engineer working on sustainable computing solutions. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours and covered everything from quantum mechanics to our shared love of science fiction novels. When we started dating, he knew I was comfortable financially but had no idea about the acquisition until months into our relationship. "I'm not dating your money," he said when I finally told him the full story. "I'm dating the woman who gets excited about sustainable server farms and makes terrible jokes about quantum entanglement." For the first time in my life, I was in a relationship where my professional success was appreciated but not the primary focus. David loved my ambition and intelligence, but he also loved my terrible cooking attempts and my obsession with true crime podcasts. Meanwhile, I began using my wealth in ways that felt authentic to my values. I established a foundation focused on supporting women in STEM fields, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds. I funded coding boot camps, research grants, and mentorship programs. I also angel invested in startups led by women and minority founders, providing not just capital but active mentorship based on my own entrepreneurial journey. The work was incredibly fulfilling, allowing me to leverage my experience and resources to create opportunities for others. 18 months after the family confrontation, I received an unexpected call. It was Victoria, and her tone was different, quieter, less demanding. "Elena, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen." She proceeded to tell me about her recent diagnosis with ADHD and anxiety disorders that had gone unrecognized since childhood. The revelation explained many of her academic struggles and financial impulsiveness, but more importantly, it had sparked a period of reflection about our family dynamics. "I've been in therapy," she said quietly, "and I'm starting to understand how we all contributed to this mess. I'm not calling to ask for money or to try to manipulate you into reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on understanding my part in everything that happened. The conversation was brief, but it planted a seed of hope. Not for returning to old patterns, but for the possibility of building something new and healthier. 6 months later, Victoria called again. This time, she asked if we could meet for coffee when I was next in Phoenix. Not at the family home. Not with our parents, just the two of us. I hesitated but agreed. Our coffee meeting was awkward at first, but Victoria's sincerity was evident. She'd been in therapy for over a year, working through her own issues with money, achievement, and self-worth. She'd also started her own small marketing consultancy, built slowly with her own resources rather than family bailouts. I need to apologize, she said, not for asking for help, but for the way we asked. The manipulation, the coordinated pressure, using the kids as emotional leverage, it was wrong. She also shared information that shocked me. Our parents' financial situation was even worse than they'd revealed. Dad's gambling addiction had escalated, and they were facing potential bankruptcy. But instead of asking me to fix it again, Victoria wanted to discuss how the family could address the crisis healthily. I can't enable Dad anymore, she said. And I can't keep expecting you to be the family's financial solution. We need to deal with our problems ourselves. Over the following months, Victoria and I began building a new relationship. We met occasionally for sister coffee dates when I was in town. We texted about books and TV shows rather than money and family drama. Slowly, carefully, we found common ground that wasn't based on financial need or childhood roles. The relationship with our parents remained complicated. Dad eventually entered gambling addiction treatment after Victoria and I staged our own intervention, refusing any financial support until he addressed his problems. Mom struggled more with the changing family dynamics, but she gradually began seeing a therapist as well. 2 years after the original confrontation, we had our first family dinner in neutral territory, a restaurant, not the family home, with clear boundaries about conversation topics. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest in a way our family had never been before. Dad had been gambling free for 8 months. Mom had started working with a financial advisor to address their debt through legitimate means rather than family bailouts. Victoria's business was growing steadily, and she and Derek had downsized to a home they could actually afford. Most importantly, nobody mentioned my money. The twins, now 5 years old, were delightful dinner companions who knew their Aunt Elena as someone who brought interesting books and taught them simple coding games, not as a potential funding source for their future. I'm proud of you, Dad said as we were leaving the restaurant. Not for the money, but for setting boundaries and sticking to them. It forced us all to grow up. The comment meant more to me than any amount of praise for my professional achievements. Today, 3 years after the acquisition and 2 years after that devastating family dinner, I have the life I'd always wanted but never thought I deserved. David and I are engaged, planning a wedding based on what we actually want rather than what looks impressive. We're building a home together, literally. We bought land in the mountains outside Seattle and are working with architects to design a sustainable house that reflects our values. My chosen family includes Lisa, Sarah, and Amanda, who've become like sisters to me. We vacation together, celebrate each other's achievements, and provide support during difficult times. They love me for exactly who I am, not what I can provide. The relationship with Victoria continues to grow stronger. We talk honestly about our childhood now, acknowledging the different pressures we faced and how those pressures shaped us. She's become genuinely interested in my work, and I've learned to appreciate her creative perspective on business and life. My parents and I have found a comfortable middle ground. We're not as close as we might have been if our family had developed healthier patterns earlier, but there's genuine affection and respect now. Most importantly, there's honesty. The money that caused so much family trauma ultimately became the catalyst for everyone's growth. Without the crisis, we might have continued indefinitely with our dysfunctional patterns. The conflict forced us all to examine our values, behaviors, and relationships more honestly than we ever had before. My foundation has now supported over 200 women in STEM fields, funding everything from doctoral research to entrepreneur boot camps. Seeing brilliant women achieve their potential because they had access to resources and mentorship is more satisfying than any acquisition could ever be. I've also learned to enjoy my wealth guilt-free. I live in a beautiful home, travel to amazing places, and pursue hobbies that bring me joy. I can afford the best healthcare, incredible experiences, and the freedom to take risks on meaningful projects. but the real wealth is the relationships I've built with people who value me for myself, not my bank account. The hardest lesson was learning that family, whether biological or chosen, should enhance your life rather than demand that you diminish yourself to meet their needs. Real love doesn't come with financial conditions or emotional manipulation. Some people are meant to be in your life forever. Others are meant to teach you lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and the difference between love and control. Both types of relationships have value, but knowing the difference is essential for building a life that feels authentically yours. My definition of family has expanded beyond blood